I don't know who this is for, but you've been asking some hard questions. God, where are you? Or why hasn't it happened yet? Did you forget me? I came with a word straight from the heart of heaven. God did not forget you. He is not ignoring your pain. The delay is not a denial. It is divine preparation. And in this message, we're going to expose the lie of the enemy and unlock the revelation of what God is actually doing in the silence. Part 1. When God is silent, 6 minutes, we often talk about the moments when God speaks, burning bushes, thunderous clouds, dreams in the night. But no one really prepares you for the seasons when He's quiet. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've done everything right, and yet nothing moves. It cannot be real. There was a season where I felt like I was living in a wilderness of echo. The only thing louder than my prayers was God's silence. But here's the truth I had to learn the hard way. Silence does not mean absence. Sometimes God hides, not to punish, but to purify. To strip away the noise, the distractions, the dependencies, so that we can learn to recognize Him even in the stillness. He is not absent. He is observing. He is developing. He is pruning. Remember Joseph? God gave him a dream, but didn't give him a timeline. The dream was real, but so were the prison bars. The process was necessary to carry the promise. If you're in that in-between place right now, the space between a God said it and I see it, I need you to hear me. He's still working. Not behind your back, not against you, but behind the scenes for your good. Because the silence of God is often the setup for the suddenly of God. There are moments in your life when you will cry out to God and hear nothing. No whisper, no sign, no confirmation. Just silence. It's in these moments that the enemy whispers lies the loudest. He'll tell you that God has left you, that He doesn't care, that He's turned His face away from you. But the silence of God is not the absence of God. He is not a man that He should lie, nor a son of man that He should forget. If He spoke it, He will fulfill it. And if He hasn't spoken again, it might be because He is still watching to see if you will obey the last word He gave. Amen. See, silence is sacred to God. He uses it with intention. In a noisy world filled with chaos, confusion, and countless voices vying for your attention, God's silence can be unsettling, but it is never wasted. There's a difference between being ignored and being watched. And many times in the seasons when heaven seems quiet, God is doing His deepest work. Not around you, but within you. He is refining your character, building your endurance, testing your motives, stretching your capacity. He is teaching you to live not just by signs, but by trust. Because faith isn't proven when the fire falls. It's proven when the fire is gone, and you're still standing with your hands lifted in surrender. I remember a time in my life when I cried every night, wondering why I felt so distant from the God I once felt so close to. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't sin. It was obedience that led me into that wilderness. And that's what made it so confusing. When you've given up everything for the call of God, when you've said yes to His will, and suddenly it feels like you're walking alone, that's where the real battle begins. That's when the enemy starts to sow seeds of doubt. But in that wilderness, I began to realize something. God wasn't gone. He was just quiet, and His quietness was forming something deeper in me than His voice ever could. Sometimes we crave a fresh word, a new revelation, a dramatic confirmation. But what we really need is to develop the endurance to walk faithfully with what we've already received. God doesn't always speak because He's training you to recognize His presence even when His voice is not loud. The mature believer doesn't just need God's voice, they need God's heart, and God's heart is often revealed in the stillness. Think about Elijah. He expected God in the fire, the wind, the earthquake, but God came in a gentle whisper. That whisper was not the absence of power. It was the presence of intimacy. The silence of God is also a form of trust. When a teacher is silent during a test, it doesn't mean they've left the room. It means they believe you're ready to prove what you've already been taught. That test is not to disqualify you. It's to reveal what's been planted inside of you. You're stronger than you think. You're more anointed than you feel. The silence is not abandonment. It's God giving you space to grow into the fullness of who He's called you to be. It's His way of saying, I've equipped you for this. Now walk it out. There's also a divine jealousy in the silence of God. He's not interested in sharing your affection with idols, including the idol of comfort. So He'll remove the crutches. He'll turn down the noise. He'll withdraw the constant affirmations because He wants your roots to go deeper than feelings. He wants your love to be unconditional. He wants a relationship where you pursue Him not just because of what He says, but because of who He is. And that kind of relationship is only forged in silence, in the dark, in the places where faith has to speak louder than your fear. In the Bible, Jesus Himself experienced the silence of God. On the cross, He cried out, "Oh my God, my God, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And yet, even in that moment, God was fulfilling His greatest plan. His silence was not rejection, it was redemption in motion. And if Jesus had to go through that valley, so will we. But like Jesus, we don't have to stay there. Because resurrection always follows surrender. Glory always follows the grave. You are not being punished, you are being positioned. The silence is a signal that something is shifting in the spirit. Heaven is watching, angels are attending. And God is preparing to do something that will make the silence worth it. But can you trust Him even when He's not speaking? Can you remain faithful even when He's not confirming? Can you worship even when you don't feel Him? These are the questions that silence answers. And your answers to them determine your maturity, your authority, and your destiny. Because silence doesn't mean God has walked away. It means He's drawing you deeper, calling you higher, and refining you for something greater than you can currently see. There is a narrative that plays out in the hearts of believers when delay creeps in, one that the enemy uses to paint a picture of failure, abandonment, or disqualification. But delay is not denial. What feels like a pause in your life may actually be the preparation of a divine performance. God is not late. He's strategic. He is not holding back. He is holding forward. And oftentimes what feels like God withholding a promise is really Him working out the details so that when the door opens, you'll be ready to walk through it with the maturity and weight it requires. God's promises come with process. The weight of the calling you carry cannot be sustained by a foundation that hasn't been tested. So He builds in silence. He sharpens you in private. He delays what is public until what is private is stable. Because you can't carry a kingdom assignment with fragile faith. You can't steward influence with shallow roots. And you can't represent the King with an unsubmitted heart. So the delay is grace. It's a shield. It's mercy dressing itself up in discomfort to teach you things you never knew you needed to learn. When we look at scripture, delay is a consistent theme in the lives of those chosen by God. Abraham waited decades for Isaac. David was anointed king as a boy but sent back to tend sheep. Joseph saw a dream in his youth but endured betrayal, slavery, and prison before promotion. Jesus waited 30 years before stepping into public ministry. Delay is the training ground of destiny. It separates the called from the committed, the enthusiastic from the surrendered, the emotional from the anchored. Anyone can praise when things are moving fast, but only the refined can worship in the waiting room. Delay tests what you believe, not just about God, but about yourself. Will you still see yourself as chosen when nothing around you looks like favor? Will you still confess that you are blessed when your bank account says otherwise? Will you still walk like you're healed when symptoms persist? Delay is not a denial. It's a test of identity. The enemy wants you to believe that waiting equals being forgotten. But God sees every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of sacrifice and obedience. Nothing is lost in His economy. The delay is not a detour. It's part of the design. Sometimes the delay is not even about you. It's about what God is aligning in the background. It's about people you haven't met yet, whose destiny is connected to yours. It's about doors that haven't been built yet. It's about favor that hasn't been released yet. And if God were to give you the promise prematurely, it would collapse under pressure. But He loves you too much to let that happen. So he waits, and he asks you to wait, not with bitterness, but with boldness, not with passivity, but with expectation. Because when God finally says, and now everything that was delayed begins to make sense, we often confuse delay with inactivity. But delay is not God doing nothing. It's God doing more than we can see. It's God orchestrating, aligning, repositioning. It's God being strategic. His delay is layered. It protects you from premature exposure. It closes doors that you thought you wanted. It saves you from relationships that look good, but were toxic to your purpose. It exposes hidden motives in people you were about to trust. And it reveals hidden weaknesses in your own character needed to be addressed before elevation. What you call a delay, heaven may call development. You are not behind, you are being built. And when God builds a thing, he takes his time. Because what he's preparing you for is not seasonal, it's generational. You're not just waiting for a job or a platform or a spouse. You're being equipped to shift atmospheres, to break cycles, to carry the mantle of deliverance, to release the fragrance of heaven into the earth. That kind of oil is not cheap. That kind of glory is not rushed. And that kind of legacy requires layers of obedience, trust, and pruning. So yes, it feels like you've been overlooked. Yes, it feels like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in the same place. But what if you're not stuck? What if you're stationed? What if God has planted you, not to punish you, but to root you so deeply that when the storm comes, you won't be shaken? What if your delay is not a sign that God is done with you, but a sign that he is just beginning? Because the deeper the foundation, the higher the elevation. And what God is about to do through you requires a level of weight that only time and trust can build. Delay is not comfortable, but it is necessary. It's the classroom where character is formed. It's the wilderness where your ears are trained to hear his whisper. It's the quiet place where your heart is softened and your will is surrendered. And it's the sacred space where pride dies and purpose is born. The delay will not last forever, but what you gain from it will. So don't despise it. Don't run from it. Embrace it as the sacred classroom where God is shaping you for the very thing you've been praying for. There are places in our lives that no one sees, wounds so deep that even words can't reach them, smiles that mask brokenness, silent battles fought in the night when the world is sleeping and your soul is screaming for peace. And it's in these hidden places, those private, quiet, unspoken corners of your life, that God often begins the most profound healing. He doesn't wait until you're perfect. He doesn't wait until you've got it all together. He meets you exactly where you are, in the mess, in the mystery, in the middle of your pain. Healing with God isn't always loud. It doesn't always come through fireworks or flashing lights. Sometimes it comes through a gentle nudge, a soft whisper, a tale you didn't expect to fall. Sometimes it comes when you finally exhale after holding your breath for too long. God heals in layers, not because he's limited, but because he's loving. If he gave you all your healing at once, it would overwhelm you. So he touches one area and then waits. Not because he's slow, but because he's kind. Because he knows that some wounds took years to form and they must be unraveled slowly so your heart can keep up. Many of us are looking for God to heal what is visible, the habits, the choices, the patterns. But God is far more interested in healing the root, not just the fruit. He goes beneath the surface. He addresses the lie you believed when they left you. He uncovers the wound you buried when they said you weren't enough. He gently reveals the bitterness you justified, the insecurity you normalized, the shame you hid. And he does it not to condemn you, but to free you. Because what you conceal, you can't heal. But you surrender, he will redeem. Healing begins in hidden places because God doesn't need an audience to restore you. The world looks for transformation in public. God begins it in private. The moments when no one is clapping. The seasons when no one is watching. The prayers you pray when your voice is trembling and your hope is fading. Those are the places where heaven leans in, where angels surround you, where the Holy Spirit hovers over your brokenness like he hovered over the waters in Genesis, bringing order to chaos, speaking life where there was void, calling forth beauty out of nothingness. And even though it's hidden, it's holy. That hospital room where you whispered his name, holy. That car ride where you broke down in tears, holy. That journal you filled with questions and scriptures and hopes you didn't tell anyone about, holy. Because God doesn't just dwell in churches and choirs. He dwells in contrite hearts. He inhabits surrendered spaces. And when he sees that you've invited him into the mess, into the pain, into the hiddenness, he begins to move. Not always fast, but always deep. Not always loud, but always real. There is something sacred about allowing God to do surgery on your soul without needing applause for your process. You don't have to post it. You don't have to prove it. You just have to let him in. He already knows. He saw the moment it broke. He remembers what you tried to forget, and he's not afraid of it. He's not intimidated by your darkness. He's not repelled by your weakness. In fact, that's where he is drawn, because his strength is made perfect in weakness, and his love finds his home in broken places. Some of the greatest healing doesn't happen when you're shouting in worship. It happens when you're quiet in reflection and reflection. When you sit with the Father and let him remind you that you are still his child, that nothing you've done has canceled your value, that no scar is too deep for his hands to touch, that even the parts of you you've deemed unworthy are still worthy of love in his eyes. Because healing is not just about feeling better, it's about becoming whole. It's about remembering who you are in him before life tried to tell you otherwise. God often begins healing in hidden places because that's where trust is built. If he only touched what you were willing to show, you'd never know the depth of his love. But when he steps into your private pain, when he moves through the memories you've locked away, when he places his hand on the place you thought no one could reach, suddenly you realize that his love has no boundaries, no expiration, no fear. He covers every part of you, the seen and the unseen. The loud and the silent, the present and the past. Healing is a journey, not a moment. And while others may only see the fruit of it later, God is already celebrating the seed that's been planted now. Every step you take toward wholeness, no matter how small, is progress in his eyes. Every time you choose forgiveness instead of bitterness, every time you pray instead of numb, every time you hope instead of hide, you are walking in healing. And he is walking with you, in the quiet, in the dark, in the hidden places where real restoration begins. We often think faith alone is enough to move mountains. And yes, faith is powerful. It pleases God, it opens doors. But there's something even more challenging than faith: trust. Faith believes that God can. Trust believes that even if he doesn't, he is still good. Trust is what keeps you grounded when faith doesn't produce the miracle immediately. Trust is what keeps your heart still when your prayers go unanswered, your plans fall apart, and your timeline seems to be ignored by heaven. God's timing doesn't follow our urgency. It doesn't bend to our anxiety. He operates on a schedule that is built on eternity, not convenience. And when you're in a place where you know God has spoken, you know he has promised, and yet you see no signs of movement, that's where trust begins to grow. Because trust isn't required when things make sense. Trust is birthed when nothing adds up, and yet you still believe God is writing a good story with your life. There are seasons where God will give you a promise and then seem to disappear. Not because he's forgotten what he said, but because he's watching to see if you can hold on to his word even when you have no proof. Trust is the bridge between revelation and manifestation. It's what carries you through the delay, the disappointment, the detours. It's what keeps your posture worshipful when your heart is breaking. Trust is not just believing in what God can do. It's being fully persuaded that his way is better, even if it contradicts yours. So many of us are in a hurry to see the breakthrough, the relationship, the platform, the dream come to pass. We want it now. We want the harvest without the process, the elevation without the crushing. But God knows what premature blessings can do to unprepared hearts. Timing is not just about waiting for the right moment. It's about becoming the right person. If he gave you what you were praying for too early, it might destroy you. It might inflate your pride. It might keep you from leaning on him. So instead, he takes his time. He slows you down not to frustrate you, but to form you. There's a hidden mercy in the waiting. Because while you're focused on the outcome, God is focused on the foundation. He's working on things in you that you don't even know need healing. He's strengthening the muscles of obedience, patience, and discernment. He's refining your motives, aligning your desires with his heart. And this takes time. You can't microwave maturity. You can't rush transformation. The deeper the root, the stronger the tree. And God is in the business of building strong trees, not shallow ones. The hardest part of trusting God's timing is when you see others getting what you're still waiting for. You see them getting married, getting the promotion, launching the ministry, walking in the fruit of what you've been crying out for. And you begin to wonder, did God forget about me? But trust silences the lies. Trust reminds you that your story is different, your race is unique, and your timeline is sacred. What God has for you will not pass you by. It will not land in someone else's lap. It will not be lost. But it will come when it's supposed to, not when you're desperate, not when you're panicking, but when you're ready. God is not a genie, and this walk with him is not transactional. It's covenantal. It's a relationship. And trust is the foundation of any real relationship. He wants to be more than your provider. He wants to be your friend. He wants to be the one you lean on when nothing makes sense. The one you run to not just for answers, but for peace. And peace isn't found in getting everything you want. Peace is found in knowing who's holding the clock. Trust says, even when I don't know what's next, I know who holds next. When Mary was told she would carry Jesus, the angel didn't give her all the steps, just a word. And she said, be it unto me according to your word. That's trust. That's surrender. That's saying yes to a divine plan that may come with mystery, pain, and waiting. But it's also a yes to purpose, to destiny, to being part of something so much bigger than yourself. Sometimes trusting God's timing means letting go of your calendar, your plans, your 5-year goals, and resting in the reality that he knows what he's doing, even when you don't. You may be in a season where doors seem shut, where nothing is changing, where your efforts feel wasted. But trust is the anchor that holds you steady in the storm. It reminds you that delay is not denial, that closed doors are protection, that silence is not absence. Trust is what gives you peace in the process. It's what allows you to rest while you wait. And that rest is not a passive waiting. It's an active surrender. It's a deep, unshakable knowing that the same God who started the work will be faithful to complete it. There's a divine mystery in the way God answers our prayers. We often think that when we pray for something, God will simply deliver it into our hands. But what we don't always see is that many times, instead of giving us what we ask for immediately, God starts preparing us for what we've asked for. You are being prepared for what you prayed for. That burden you're carrying, the challenges you're facing, the delays and detours, all of it is shaping you into someone who can carry the weight of your request. When you prayed for influence, God began to build your character. When you prayed for love, he began to heal your heart. When you asked for leadership, he started to refine your patience. The prayer was not ignored, it was activated. But in the kingdom, activation often looks like agitation. It looks like things being shaken, things being broken, things being tested. Because the oil you're asking for flows from the crushing. The wisdom you desire grows in the wilderness. The platform you dream of is built in private on the foundation of consistency, humility, and obedience. God does not give elevation without preparation. He knows the pressure that comes with answered prayers. He knows what it takes to sustain what you've asked for. And because he's a good father, he will never give you something that your character cannot carry. He would rather delay a blessing than see it crush you. That's why the process is so important. That's why he'll let you walk through trials that stretch you. That's why he'll expose areas of your life that still need healing. He's not punishing you. He's preparing you. Sometimes you're in a season where nothing makes sense. But if you take a step back, you'll begin to notice that what you're going through directly connects to what you've been praying for. You asked for peace, and now he's teaching you how to let go of control. You asked for spiritual authority, and now he's putting you through battles that require fasting and discernment. You asked to be used by him, and now he's stripping away distractions and idols from your heart. You are being shaped, molded, and matured for the very thing your soul cried out for. It's easy to romanticize the promise and overlook the preparation. But the space between prophecy and fulfillment is the most sacred ground. That's where your roots go deep. That's where your faith is forged. That's where you learn to hear God, not for what he can do for you, but for who he is. In that space, God becomes more than a means to a blessing. He becomes the blessing himself. And that's exactly what he desires. To be your source, your sustainer, your satisfaction. He wants to make sure that when the promise comes, it won't take his place in your heart. There is a depth to your preparation that others may never see. They may look at your life and see someone who's behind, someone who's overlooked. But they don't know the nights you've wrestled with God in prayer. They don't know the sacrifices you've made in silence. They don't know the tears you've cried when no one was watching. They don't know the level of obedience it took to stay in alignment. But God knows, and he's been watching. And he's been writing. Every act of obedience, every surrender, every moment of worship, it's all being written into the story of your preparation. You are not being forgotten. You are being formed. And just because the fruit is invisible yet doesn't mean the seed isn't growing. Some of the most powerful growth happens underground in the dark where no one can applaud or affirm you. But that's where God builds you the strongest. Because when the time comes and he opens the doors and the prayers begin to manifest, you won't just be ready to receive the blessing. You'll be ready to carry it with honor, to protect it with wisdom, to steward it with maturity. The journey hasn't been easy, and the waiting hasn't always felt holy. But every stretch, every delay, every lesson has had purpose. God wastes nothing. The pain, the pressure, the pruning, it's all part of the preparation. And when the time is right, when the soil of your heart is deep enough, and your hands are steady enough, and your motives are pure enough, he will release the very thing you once whispered to him in prayer. And it will not just bless you, it will bless generations after you. So keep walking, keep trusting, keep growing. Even when you don't feel it, God is working. Even when you can't see the results, heaven is moving. Even when your prayers seem unanswered, your preparation is not in vain. The one who called you is faithful, and he will finish what he started. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are being prepared for what you prayed for, and when it comes, it will be more than worth the wait.